Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. Let's get you more about the man of the moment, Keir Starmer. His party has won a landslide in the UK elections. Starmer took charge of Labour in 2020. This was after Labour Party suffered its worst electoral defeat in 84 years under left-wing veteran Jeremy Corbyn. Starmer will be the oldest person to become British Prime Minister in almost half a century. And to understand the verdict of the UK elections, we are now joined by Dr. Nigel Fletcher, political historian from King's College London. Dr. Fletcher is also the co-founder of the Centre for Opposition Studies there. Welcome, sir, to the programme. Do you see the Labour's victory more as a vote for the Labour Party or more as a vote against the Conservative Party?
Well, that's a very good question, because one of the things that you have to consider when you're looking at British electoral politics is this perennial question of do oppositions win elections or do governments lose them? And really the answer to that is that it's a bit of both. But in this election, there does seem to be a case for saying that this is much more to do with the Conservatives losing the election than Labour winning it. And if you compare this, for example, to the 1997 general election, where Labour won a huge landslide under Tony Blair, their vote share there was in the sort of 40s. They were in sort of 43, 44% of the vote. And the Conservatives were down at 30%, and that resulted in a huge Labour majority. In this election, Labour are much lower than that. They're into the 30s in their vote share. But they are still achieving a huge majority because the Conservatives are so much lower. Their vote share is down in the 20s. So I think on that basis, we can say that this is a vote against the Conservatives rather than it is a vote for Labour.
Labour Party leader Keir Starmer, who is said to be the next Prime Minister of Britain, has said that change begins now. So what are the major changes that Labour is likely to affect in the UK?
Well, it's quite a funny one because he put that word on the front of his manifesto, just a single word, change. And I was sort of up all night going around different election events, and lots of the Labour supporters were wearing badges and stickers, some of them wearing baseball caps with this word change on it. And the funny thing is that the way that Keir Starmer has managed to assemble such a popular electoral offer is by not offering an awful lot of change. Jeremy Corbyn, his predecessor, offered a very radical manifesto of all sorts of very expensive policies. But Keir Starmer and his incoming Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, have tried to reassure people that actually not very much is going to change. They're not going to put up taxes. They're not going to make much of a change to spending, for example. There's lots of things that that they're talking about in terms of doing them better, but actually the policy offer is really quite slight. So it's kind of ironic that they are offering change when a lot of their offer is that reassurance and trying to tell the British people that they're not scary, they're not going to do lots of dramatic things.
Dr. Fletcher, what do you see as the main challenge facing the new Prime Minister? How far is the gradual recovery of the world economy and Britain's economy likely to help the Labour Party achieve its economic goals?
Well, the big problem that he has got is that, unlike Tony Blair in 1997, there isn't very much money. Britain is still suffering from the after effects of COVID, where a lot of money had to be spent, but also the effects of the spike in energy prices, and that caused an increase in inflation, which is only slowly coming down. So the economic picture for Keir Starmer as he takes office is a lot worse than it was for New Labour in 1997. And so there isn't much room for manoeuvre. And the independent financial experts, the IFS, have said that Labour will have to either cut spending or increase taxes in order to make their sums add up. And Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, the incoming Chancellor, have rejected that and said that what they're trying to do is to stimulate economic growth and that will pay for their plans. But in the short term, that's very difficult to do. So they do have lots of very difficult decisions ahead of them. And I think they're really going to be trying to manage expectations. Lots of people who were fed up with the Conservatives wanted to get rid of them and have managed to do that quite effectively overnight, are looking to Labour to do lots of things that they promised to do. The expectations on them are going to be very high, and unlike the previous Labour government when it came in, they don't have the money to be able to fulfil a lot of those objectives. So it's going to be a difficult one for them to try to manage people's expectations and to do things differently and to show competence, but without that sort of economic headroom that they might like to have.
Rishi Sunak has claimed responsibility for the loss. Do you think the decision of calling a snap elections in May, even when the Conservatives were trailing Labour by some 20 points in opinion polls, was a very wrong move?
Well, I think in retrospect, it does look as though it was a very bad decision. But you have to understand, I think, why he might have thought it would work. One of the big things that has damaged the Conservatives in this election has been the rise of the Reform UK party under Nigel Farage. And by calling the election early, I think Rishi Sunak hoped that they wouldn't have enough time to mount a proper campaign. And in particular, that Nigel Farage himself would not stand in the election. At the start of the campaign, he said he wasn't going to, and that would have really reduced their appeal. What happened in the first couple of weeks was Nigel Farage changed his mind, announced that he would stand for Parliament, and of course that then increased his coverage and a lot of attention was paid to them. And they've done a lot better in this election than they might otherwise have done. So that failed as a tactic by Rishi Sunak. And the other thing I think that he might have wanted to call the election early for was because, frankly, things could have got a lot worse. There is not a huge amount of good economic news coming along. There's a few promising signs. But with the state of the Conservative Party in particular, they really were starting to fall apart and argue amongst themselves. And as that's gone on, the Conservative poll rating has gone down and down and down in recent years. And I think that one of the parts of his calculation will have been that he was concerned that if he hung on for even longer, their poll rating might have got even lower. So I think calling it early was perhaps an attempt to stem the damage and to try to make the best of what was clearly going to be a very bad situation.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Nigel Fletcher, for this analysis. We really appreciate you joining us.